Okay, good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Jeremy Abbott, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I see as a trend happening today in the US, but also here, and that has to do with this whole idea of do-it-yourself, DIY with technology, somewhat the makers movement, but more about makers in general, just people that are hacking things, tinkering with things, and sharing what they do. So, and I've also invited two other friends from the US, so Kyle McDonald and Kate. So they're going to come on after me, and then after that, we're going to have a little panel. So if you have any questions, feel free to answer questions. And if you're hesitant about questions, you can always send them via Twitter with this hashtag #HelloMakers, and then I'll try to moderate the questions that way. So I think a lot of presentations have been talking about where we're headed with technology and where things are going. But some of you might have seen this before, but I believe for a glimpse of the future, we have to look at how childhood has evolved or changed, and not so much the technology. And I think that's a good point to measure things, because if we think about what we did when we were children and how childhood has now changed to where it is now, there's been massive change. So I'm going to go through some examples. Firstly, we have to think about how children play and how they learn. So if we take away the screen, hopefully everybody, when their kids are younger, they don't have a screen in front of them. So they learn by doing things, by trying things out, and by playing in the sand and whatnot. And then eventually, if the environment is right, at least in my household, they start hacking things. So we go to the flea market, and we take things apart, and then we buy an old robot, and we take it apart, and we rebuild it and try to do new things. So maybe this is a little bit different than your household or than kids you might know, but I think that's the general idea that I would like to promote, is less consumption and more recycling and hacking things and doing things yourself. And there's a number of tools that promote this as well. This is relatively new. It's called Little Bits. And basically, it's a set that uses magnets and sensors and electronics, and the kids can actually build things, and then they go together through magnets, and they can actually build things using things that would usually be typically hard with electronics. And then this is my son Ellis. He's the oldest, and he's 5, and he's already started a little bit hacking with Arduino. So Arduino is a prototyping platform, and he loves playing with the servo. So that's something we have to think about, is how our tools have evolved over the years. So if we think about where we are now, and then where we're heading, and where we were in the past, then I think that's something we can take into account to see where we're going to be in the next few months or next few days. So if we look at this screen from 2001, The Space Odyssey, if you guys remember the scene with the monkeys, the monkey or the apes, they pick up a bone and then they start hammering things. And that's kind of a huge scene, whereas it becomes the first tool for these monkeys. And then he throws it up in the air, and then it dissolves into a spaceship. So we are in between the past and the future right now. We are in the present. We're right here in the middle. And what does that mean exactly? That means basically we're using these devices, these iPhones, and we're coming up with things like what used to be classified ads, to sell something. We're coming up with new ideas to sell things locally using GPS and geo-coordinating, whatever it might be. But we haven't gone that far yet. I think for the development of an app, it's quite difficult, actually. So I think what I think we need to do, is we need to create tools for ourselves and for kids and for people that are just generally interested in building things and talking to machines. We have to create tools that make it easier for kids and people that are interested in these things to actually do them. So if we look at the evolution of computing, basically, we've gone from a laptop, this is the one laptop per child, to the telephone, which is like a black box, which is very hard to program with, unless you know C++, to this prototyping board. And this is where I think we are right now. And this is the moment where this whole idea with makers and being able to do stuff yourself, the DIY, whereas it becomes interesting, because the cost of this is around $20 to $35, and it's basically a Lego brick And you can do different things with this Lego brick, and then you can control different things, like a lot of stuff we've seen today, this Internet of Things and whatnot. So our tools have been changing and evolving since we've been moving on. So one of the, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about tools. So you have the breadboard, you have a prototyping board, and you have other things. And obviously, the tools have been evolving also with open source. So processing is a platform for basically started by the Media Lab and now mostly made for designers, but also for people that do visualizations. But it's also relatively easy to get into versus learning C++ or whatever it might be. And then there's another platform called Open Frameworks, which Kyle does a lot of work on Open Frameworks, and he's going to talk more to this. And then lastly, what I see as seminal in this whole movement of doing things yourself is this Arduino platform. And Kate is going to talk a little bit about Arduino. So we've gone from the screen-based to physical-based and back and forth. And I think that's where we're heading right now. There's going to be a blurring of the lines between what is digital. Is it physical, or is it screen-based, or what is it exactly? I think the only way to really find out about this kind of stuff is to really be genuinely curious and be involved and try to take some workshops or try to get into the community and see exactly what that is. And then we did a workshop, my wife and I did a workshop with some kids. They were, I think, 11 through 12. And it was basically basic electronics. So how can you take things apart? How can you hack things? And it was like 3 hours. And what they did is they had the basic LEDs and resistors and stuff. And in the end, they built little bristle bots. So this little thing has a motor on it, and it would move around the floor. So that's where I think we should be bringing things. Instead of always developing for this thing or the computer, I think we need to start thinking about how does the physical world impact education, and how are we doing things that way. This is a quote from an author: "The creative adult is the child that survived." And I think almost everybody, hopefully, is wanting to be creative or has the ambition to do creative things. And I think sometimes, as we grow older, this whole idea of creativity, it gets kind of educated out of us. All of a sudden, it's all about everything above the neck. You know, it's all about getting your A's, your 1.0 notes, or whatever it might be. And sometimes we tend to forget what exactly are we doing. You know, it's all about working with the head, and we have to work with the whole body. So I think just like kids that play, I think adults have to play too. So here's a workshop that we also gave at the university, also with Arduino. And it was basic electronics. And the students were art directors and designers, and they have no idea what LEDs are or electronics for the most case. So, and that's always the challenge, is working with visual artists or visual people, is having them actually build things with their hands and seeing things actually happen. And like I said, everyone has the possibility to do it. You just have to want to do it. So here we are. This is the hello world of the Arduino world. So what you have to do is you have this thing, and you have to get an LED blinking. And when you see the people, you know, play with the wires and stuff, and they actually see the LED blink, it's like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. And that's something that everyone should try to experience. And so we worked in teams, and they did it in 3 hours, and they had LED blinking, and they also had a servo. So a servo is a motor that moves, and they had that moving as well. So it was pretty major as far as getting things going. And I think that's another thing for designers and artists and just people in general. I think we have to actually involve ourselves and get our hands dirty to really understand what does it mean, this Internet of Things or physical computing and whatnot. Where is our future headed? So I'm doing a really quick intro. To wrap it up, what is a maker? A maker is basically someone that does things and shares it with the world. It can be tinkering with things. It can be programming screen stuff. It can be doing models for 3D printing. It can be using the laser cutter to do things. But I think the maker, or this whole idea of maker movement as well, it's about giving back to the community. And I think a lot of times in business, we don't give enough back to the community. And that's something that's essential for the future of where we're headed. If we don't educate our children right, or we don't educate ourselves in the right way or in different ways, then we're going to be lost. So you might know this from Barbara Kruger, and I threw the make on it. I shop, therefore I am. I think we're heading from a consumerist reality to a more of a maker community, or more of a community or a world where people start questioning things by doing things.